Thank you for inviting me to deliver this talk. Thanks to the UN, thanks to the OP Jindal University. There are various reasons why this has to be done in the form of this pre-recorded format. I've been asked to speak on a topic, and this topic has been given to me under two different titles. One says ethics of artificial intelligence, and the second one says adharma of artificial intelligence. I will speak on ethics of artificial intelligence. The word dharma is a very complicated one. It has all kinds of different meanings in different kinds of contexts. So unless someone tells me what they mean when they use the word dharma, I don't know what they mean when they use the word adharma. So yes, dharma and adharma may be buzzwords, they may be nice words to use, but I don't understand what they mean. It's a bit like people telling me I'm an atheist. I don't know what the word atheist means because A is a negation. So unless you tell me what the theist is, I don't know what the atheist is. Just as unless you tell me what form of knowledge you're against, I don't know what the word agnostic means. So therefore, although one of the titles that was given to me says adharma of artificial intelligence, I will stay away from using the word dharma because I don't know what is meant by it in this particular context. Ethics of artificial intelligence. AI, artificial intelligence, has become a big buzzword. Every once in a while, we discover something new and it becomes a buzzword. I still am extremely fond of science fiction. The word robot or robot is used quite a lot. And it's probably now become a general knowledge question, a quiz question. Who coined the word robot? And people who participate in quiz contests will know that this word was coined by Karl Capek, although Karl Capek later said that it was his brother who came up with that expression. Karl Capek in 1920 came up with this word, robot, in his play, Rossum's Universal Robots. I don't think too many people have actually read the play. I don't think too many people have read Karl Capek's works. Had they done so, they would have realized, not just in that play, but across the entire corpus of the work that Karl Capek produced 100 years ago, he visited all of these ethical questions that we are asking today. He asked those ethical questions about what he then regarded as modern industrial processes, mass production, nuclear weapons, robots, androids, all questions that were asked 100 years ago. And we keep asking them today because we've simply forgotten that those questions were asked. I said science fiction. And science fiction also reminds me of Isaac Asimov. And Isaac Asimov's 3 laws of robotics, which people who read science fiction or watch science fiction films will remember. And there are the 3 famous laws of robotics. 1, robots must not, and it's a hierarchy of laws, robots must not harm humans. First law. Second law, robots must obey orders of humans unless that violates the first law. And the third law is a robot must protect itself unless it violates the preceding two laws. So again, in some sense, the questions that were asked by Asimov in his work, as depicted in, let us say, the film I, Robot or the book, are questions that had already been asked, and we are re-asking those questions about artificial intelligence. But the question that remains, and I'm underlining this because science fiction or science fiction writers did ask these questions. Who frames these laws? Whenever we are talking about ethics, we are indeed talking about laws. So who frames these laws? And do robots or does artificial intelligence understand these laws? In our arrogance, and I will come back to this point later on, we tend to assume that we have the right to frame these laws, we have the right to ask these questions about ethics, and these questions and these answers, these laws, these ethical principles will automatically be accepted by artificial intelligence or AI, whatever be its definition. And again, going back to science fiction, it used to be a cult film, probably still is. Some people probably still watch it. 2001, A Space Odyssey, and HAL. Ethics is always society specific. Ethics is always history specific. As an example, let me mention a story that Bertrand Russell wrote in 1972. It was called A Boston Lady. Bertrand Russell was a philosopher, a famous philosopher, winner of the Nobel Prize, but he also wrote short stories. As short stories, I don't think they were great short stories. Bertrand Russell was better at other things. But they illustrated the ethical dilemmas of the time. And this particular story that I'm talking about, A Boston Lady, was published in 1972. To state it very, very simply, 72, remember, to state it very, very simply, I'm paraphrasing a little bit, caricaturing a little bit. The world is threatened with nuclear disaster. So there is a plane that's flying around 30,000 feet, 35,000 feet above the ground with human beings, and the idea is when this nuclear holocaust happened and the human species is exterminated, these people will repopulate the earth and ensure the continuation of the human species. Fine. The plane crashes. Everyone dies except one particular lady from Boston. Everyone else dies. This particular lady from Boston is the only one who survives. And she's expecting. She delivers a male child. Ethical dilemma before us, before her. Which is more important? Is it more important to observe the principle of not indulging in incest, or is it more important to have intercourse with her own son so that the human species survives? As it so happens, she has that physical relationship. As it so happens, the nuclear holocaust is averted at the last minute. A ship comes along, rescues her. She goes back to Boston, where she's shunned by society because she has indulged in incest. And finally, she has no option but to commit suicide. I gave this example to illustrate that ethics and laws and rules are never universal. They are relative, they are history specific, they are society specific. In some particular context, avoidance of incest may be important, in another not. Laws of whatever form, and I'm using the word laws generally, of whatever form evolved to manage interactions within society. As long as we lived in small communities, everyone knew everyone else. We did not need these laws. But these laws, these principles of ethics become important the moment we move to larger communities where there is anonymity, we don't know the other person, and therefore we need a certain template of rules and principles that goes by the name of ethics. Take the example of the 10 Commandments. Well, the Bible, if you sit down and count, they aren't exactly 10, and the list is not consistent, but doesn't matter. One of those 10 commandments that we remember, all of us do, is that the seventh day is the day of the Sabbath. We shall not work on the seventh day. We follow that scrupulously. Many countries in the world, the seventh day is a day of rest. But what is the complete 10 commandment, that particular commandment? Before it says that the seventh day is a day of rest, it says, you shall labor for the other 6 days. So the complete commandment is not only that you should rest on Sunday, but that you should labor for 6 days of the week. If in certain societies we now have 4 days of the week, we are violating that particular command. Because, as I just said, I'm supposed to work for 6 days in the week. How can I now work only for 4 days in a week? That's a violation of the command. Whenever we talk about things like ethics of artificial intelligence, we have in mind a slightly narrow dimension, which is, does AI have a legal identity? Does AI have culpability? These are valid questions. They are narrow questions in my view, for a reason I will mention a little later, but these are valid questions because now we have a situation where I think in Saudi Arabia in 2017, a robot was given legal identity. So obviously, people who write on law, people who work in OP Jindal, the UN system, they will ask these questions. What is the culpability of AI? What is the legal identity of AI? If something happens because of AI, who's culpable? I said at the beginning that I think AI is a bit of a buzzword. We presume a lot of things will happen because of AI. It reminds me of the days when we were young and there used to be a speculation that if a monkey sat down with a keyboard, would a monkey be able to at random type out the entire works of Shakespeare? The answer is, hypothetically, it is possible, but extremely improbable. The reason I mention this is, I don't know how many of you play chess or follow chess. Recently, there was a chess channel on YouTube, and those who play chess know that there is a black side, there is a white side, there are black pieces, there are white pieces. The AI blocked out that chess channel because it thought the word black smacked of racism. Any question on ethics involves value judgments. The question to ask, therefore, is, are value judgments binary? Yes or no, 0 or 1, black and white? And most value judgments aren't like that. They involve shades of gray. Otherwise, OP Jindal should do a study on how we no longer need judges and courts, because AI can resolve all court cases. The reason that does not work, and that's the reason I gave the chess example, is that everything is not binary. So the moment it comes to questions of ethics, there are these shades of gray. To me, the more fundamental question is the following. Ever since the human species evolved in the modern sense, so I'm not really talking technically about when humankind became Homo sapiens, but let us say 10,000 years ago. In the last 10,000 years, we have evolved a certain hierarchical structure in society. To caricature and simplify, let's think in terms of the categories used at the time of the French Revolution. I'm simplifying and caricature. So you had the three estates of the French Revolution. You had the clergy, you had the nobility, and you had the ordinary people, the plebeians. What is the point I'm trying to make? The plebeians were the people who worked. They are the ones who were productive in society. They are the ones who generated revenue, including tax revenue. And the clergy and the nobility were creditors because they survived on that revenue. So the workers were the plebeians, they paid taxes, and I'm trying to make a broader point. I just use that example of the French Revolution as a caricature. They are the ones who paid taxes to ensure that the thinkers, so to speak, and the rulers, so to speak, as predators, survived. As a tangential note, quite often a question is asked, will AI completely substitute for human labor? I think the question to be asked really is, a labor capital choice is a function of relative prices. And particularly in a country like India, the relative price of AI will always be higher than the relative price of labor, because AI is capital intensive, because AI is technology intensive. So in a limited sense, there are some segments where AI can generally substitute for labor, but I repeat the point I just made, that the labor capital choice is a relative one. But let me make that broader point. Let's assume, for argument's sake, that AI takes over the entire work. So we are overturning the structure of society, human society, that has evolved over the last 10,000 years. The workers become completely AI. And now human beings who become things like, well, evolution is a continuous process. So human beings, they evolve and they become only large brains, and they are the predators. Will this kind of structure of society ever work? Which brings me back to the question that if we all become predators as human beings, what makes us think that AI, assuming in that science fiction world 100 years from now AI takes over, what makes us think that AI will accept the ethical rules and the ethical principles that we as humans have devised, as predators have devised? Now, this takes you really into the realm of science fiction, which is the Terminator films and Skynet and the extermination of the human race. To me, those are much more interesting questions than these limited ones of, does AI have a legal identity? Does AI have culpability? I think there is a difference between science and technology. I mean, the approaches of science and technology. The approach of science is no longer Newtonian. The approach of science generally is, there's a lot of uncertainty. We don't really know. We are in a world that is full of uncertainty. Contrast that with the approach of technology and the arrogance that comes from technology. And that arrogance tends to suggest, as human beings, we can control everything. We learned to create depth. We have now learned to create life. I think this arrogance is intrinsic in that mindset when we debate ethics, because we arrogantly think AI will come along, help increase the productivity, but as human beings, we will be able to determine the ethics. I don't think it is that simple. I think there is a structural change that is happening, not only on the limited area of ethics, in the way we have thought of human societies for thousands of years. This structural shift will be incremental, not overnight, but that I think is what we need to think about. Thank you once again for inviting me.